On today's episode of the podcast, I'll be getting you up to speed on two of my works in progress and chatting with you a little bit about some of my next steps for Franken Sweater number 2, which is a top-down raglan pullover that I am knitting for my husband. So grab your knitting or your current project, get cozy, and let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to the Wool Needles Hands Knitting Podcast. My name is Taylor, and I will be your host. This is a podcast primarily about knitting, though I do get up to other fiber-related topics from time to time, such as crochet, that we will be diving into a little bit today. I'm coming to you from a town called Henderson in southern Nevada. This is where I live with my family, who is my husband, my two sons, Ronan and Angus, our dog Pepper, and our cat Oscar. If you'd like to get in touch, you can find all of the information for reaching out to me down below in the description box, or you can just click on the link provided in the pinned comment in the comments section. That link will take you to the show notes for everything that I mention here in the podcast. And as a bonus, if you're watching this podcast from a smart TV, you can just scan the QR code that you see down in the bottom corner of the screen, and that will take you directly to the show notes where all of the contact information and the links to everything that I mention here are provided for you. By following that link, you can also learn about Fiber for the People, which is my hand-dyed yarn business. I am the owner and dyer and sole operator of Fiber for the People yarn. There is an exciting new shop update collection coming on April 1st. I'll have more information about that as I roll out the details, but just mark your calendar for April 1st for the Fiber for the People shop update at 10 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time because it's going to be a good one. Okay, I have my tea. I'm drinking chamomile tea today. This is chamomile tea by Bigelow. Honestly, I know there's lots of really nice chamomile teas out there. I actually have some dried chamomile flowers that I use for tea that are delicious. This is my favorite go-to chamomile tea. It's by Bigelow. It's perfect. I'll link to it in the description box if you're interested in a really accessible and affordable chamomile tea. It's fantastic. My coffee mug is United by Blue. I get questions about this whenever I use it on the podcast. I'll link to that down there as well. All right, let's go ahead and dive in to my first project. Now we're jumping off the podcast with crochet. I am not, I guess I could consider myself a crocheter. One who does crochet, but my experience with crochet is extremely limited. Honestly, it's limited to granny stripes and granny squares. I have no other crochet experience. And so what I share with you in terms of crochet on this channel is usually very basic. I am a knitter through and through. I'm eager to explore crochet, but right now I'm not in any hurry to kind of dive head first and full on. I'm just exploring something that I think is easy and relaxing and kind of in my current wheelhouse in terms of crochet. So this is what I shared with you guys on the last episode of the podcast. This is a throw by Mama in a Stitch or Jessica Potaz, and she has some really gorgeous patterns for blankets, but this is called the Sundance throw. So I want to say last time, watching the colors come off of the cake and onto this throw and have it just look so pretty. So these are all the colors that I have so far, and this is where I'm at in my cake. But I'm pretty sure I hadn't done any green last time, and I almost don't even think I had done any of this brown color. I think I was just about here last time we talked, and now this is my progress. How pretty are these colors, you guys? Okay, so this is your basic granny stripe ripple stitch blanket from what I can gather from the pattern. But she's put together these colors of this particular yarn. This is Lion Brand yarn Mandala. It's just a 100% acrylic yarn that you could get at a Joann or a Hobby Lobby. Well, I don't know if you can get it at Hobby Lobby, but they sell it at big box craft stores. You can purchase it on Amazon. I'll link to it down below, but it's Lion Brand Mandala and it's gorgeous. This is what it does. So you can see here, and it's really beautiful. And this is what it looks like put up in a cake. So this is the current cake that I'm working on. The design calls for 3 of these cakes of yarn by Lion Brand. It calls for Pixie, which is this one at the top. And then, oh my goodness, I can't remember what this one is. I think it's Wood Nymph. And then this one is Pegasus. So it calls for these 3 colorways in Lion Brand Mandala. And I don't know if she knew what those looked. I mean, you can see what they look like on the side of the label. So yeah, she would have known what they would have looked like fully worked up. but these colors together are just beautiful. So I have finished Pixie. So this color all the way up to here, yeah, here is this cake right here. And now I am working up here on this one. And it's just so much fun to work on. I love working my way across and then watching all of a sudden the color just completely changes. I love it. It's like color therapy, like I had mentioned before. It's exactly that. And somebody had said that the way that these work is that you have a neutral and then a color pop. So there's like a neutral color and then a pop of color. So like here it's the white and then a pop of color. And then when you go in between this grayish purple and this yellow, you're going to get this mustardy neutral. And then you're moving into this orangey cantaloupe color. And as it blends into that orangey cantaloupe color, you're going to get this kind of neutral gray brown happening. Same thing between the cantaloupe and the green. And what's really happening here is that you're blending two different colors together, getting kind of like, I don't like to say muddy because I don't think that it looks unattractive, but it is kind of a more muddy color, which leans to the neutral side, providing a really nice gradient working its way up or down the blanket. You have these really lovely pops of color, separated by really natural neutral segments, which I think is really interesting. So whoever brought that up in the comments of the last video, I thought that was really insightful. And maybe that's why it's just so visually appealing. It doesn't look color blocked. It looks like a gradient, but it also looks striped. I don't know. It's a lot of fun. So this is the Sundance Throw by Mama in a Stitch. I've made some serious progress. We took a road trip over the course of the last week and I worked on this in the car, and it was pretty decent car making, I guess you could say, but because I can't do it without looking, it tends to cause me to get a little bit car sick, kind of like reading in the car. So I enjoyed working on it. I got a lot of it done, but maybe it's not the greatest for crocheting in the car. Okay, so this is my husband's, the sweater that I'm working on for my husband. This is going to be my entrance into the Wool Needles Hands Break the Curse knit along. We're knitting sweaters for a special man in our life. If you would like to know more about this knit along, I'll leave the details in the show notes, so definitely check the show notes. This is going to be a knit along where you submit your finished object via email. So all submissions will go through email, but you can share anything that you're working on related to this knit along over on Instagram using the hashtag WNH Break the Curse KAL. Okay, so this is what I have so far. Now, I'm going to tell you right off the bat, there is no one pattern that I'm following here. If you've been following the podcast for the last few months, you know that I just finished working on a Franken sweater. It was kind of like an improvised top-down sweater that I knit for myself, and the way that I constructed the pattern was using bits and pieces of other patterns that I liked, putting them together with my own modifications to create what I considered to be the ideal top-down sweater in that particular weight category. Now, after some kind of grappling with gauge issues and yarn and fabric issues of what I had planned previously for my husband for this knit along, I decided to settle on something a little different. And if you want to know more about what I'm talking about, check out the previous episode of the podcast and the few episodes prior to that one, and you'll know kind of the saga of my husband's sweater so far, because that's what it's turning out to be. This is where I'm at with it so far. This is going to be a top-down raglan in the round sweater for my husband, knit in Lovely Valley Wool. Lovely Valley Wool is a regionally local yarn to me. They are based out of Oregon and Nevada. The sheep are raised in Nevada, and they produce the most gorgeous yarns. You can definitely check them out, link down below. This is what I was calling my Lovely Valley Wool sweater for my husband. I think it's going to end up being called Franken Sweater number 2 because it is working up to be exactly that. This is season 2 of the Franken Sweater, except this time it's for my husband, which makes that only slightly more daunting because it's not going to be something I wear. It's going to be something he wears, which puts the pressure on just a little bit. But honestly, I'm feeling really confident and just excited to make progress on this and to see where it goes. Okay, last time we spoke, I had not finished the neckline or the collar. Well, at this point, I now have a neckline. I have doubled it over and tacked it down, and I have some of my raglan yoke happening here. Now, this neckline, I love it. I love that it's doubled. I love that it's nice and structural because it's doubled. It looks like it's snug. Like when you look at this, it looks like it's going to be small because if I hold it up to my neck, it looks small. But this has so much stretch. And what I know from my previous Franken sweater, the one that you've seen me wear recently in photos on Instagram, that neckline is going to open up when I block it. I just know that it's going to open up because it did on my Franken sweater perfectly. So having this be a little bit high and tight, maybe it's not too tight. When he puts it on, it just fits. It's like putting, it's not quite a turtleneck. It's like kind of in between a mock neck and a crew neck. So it sits up a little higher on his neck. But when I look at it, I realize that when it blocks out and opens up a little bit, it's going to sit around his neck like a really nice crew neck, high and tight and just right for a man's sweater. What you see here, I mean, if I let my sweater kind of hang and do what it's going to do, this open neck, I don't like that on a man's sweater. It's too open. It kind of borders on like a narrow boat neck. I do not like that look. I know that he doesn't like that look as well. It's too open for a man's sweater, in my opinion. I think it should be a little bit higher and tight. I have a whole video talking about my thoughts on men's sweaters. I'll link it in the description box. But this sweater that I'm making for him, I want it to sit right around the base of his neck. And from what I have here and from what it looks like when I've had him try this on, that's what's going to happen. And I'm super stoked about it because I think it's just going to look so fresh and so like handsome. So here we are. It's not much to talk about. I've just started the raglan increases. I did short rows and I kind of just went with the short row formula that's laid out in the Felix pullover pattern. So this is the Felix pullover. The short rows that she does, I kind of just did that. She doesn't give you stitch counts. She just gives you kind of a general way of working short rows that you could do with any stitch count you have. In terms of figuring out my stitch count, I had mentioned this on the last episode. There's a pattern by Dale Garn called Dale Garn 29506, design 29506. I went with the stitch count for the neckline of that sweater. And then when I decided it was going to be a raglan shape, I just separated the raglans using the ratio that Petite Knit sets out in her no frills sweater. So that seems complicated. And honestly, I don't know if that's like even a scientific thing. Like I'm not being very scientific about this. I just know that I really love the raglan, increase separation on the no frills. It's very classic. And I've seen men knit the no frills. I've seen it on a man's, broader shoulders, and I think it looks fantastic. And so I figured whatever ratio she's using there for sleeve to front and back stitches, that's what I'm going to go with. So I just did some math. I checked that pattern. I realized what her ratio was, which essentially what I mean by that is what percentage of the total stitch count was she using for her sleeves and what percentage was she using for the front and the back of the sweater. Whatever that percentage was, and I had figured that out in the hotel room where we were staying because I wrote it down on the hotel notepad, what she was using percentage wise. So what percentage were the sleeve stitches, front, back, and I just did that based on my total stitch count. So I had cast it on 110 stitches initially, and then I broke that down into what turned out to be 47 front and back stitches and 24 sleeve stitches after the short rows were worked. Yeah, that was what I did. So after short row shaping, I initially cast it on 110 stitches. Did the Felix pullover short row shaping, which got me to a certain number of stitches. And then I divided that using the percentages that Petite Knit uses in the no frills into sleeves and front and back. And I came up with 24 sleeve stitches, 47 front and back stitches, and I'm working from there. As you can see, I am flying by the seat of my pants, but for some strange reason, I feel really confident about it. Like I don't feel trepidatious. I feel like I'm on the right path, but you can probably tell from all of this that I'm sharing with you that this is absolutely going to be a saga. So join me, like I said, for the sweater saga, because it is going to be real. Also, I wanted to share with you something that was sent to me by the lovely Dusana of DusanaKnit. She makes stitch markers, and I don't want to get this wrong. I want to tell you where she's from. She reached out to me on Instagram and asked if she could send me some of her gorgeous stitch markers, and I, as like a prize for the Wool Needles Hands Break the Curse knit along. So some of these will be part of the prize for that knit along. She makes handmade crystal knitting notions. I'm going to go to her website so I can tell you where she's from, because that's something I really want to share with you. Okay, so I'm on the home page of DusanaKnit. So this is her homepage. You can see those gorgeous stitch markers right there. I would like to know where she's from. Hi, my name is Dusana, and I live in Prague, Czech Republic for almost 20 years now with my beautiful family of 4. Okay, I knew she was coming from someplace in Europe. I just wasn't 100% sure. Awesome. So you can read all about her. That's her right there. She is a knitter and a maker, and she designs crystal knitting notions, and they're gorgeous. You can see some of them here. Raw aquamarine crystals, tourmaline, oh my gosh, rose quartz. You guys have to go check out her stitch markers because they are absolutely gorgeous. These are just tourmaline markers here, but I have some that I can share with you right here because she sent not only some that I'm going to be including in a prize for the Break the Curse knit along, but she also sent some for me, and I think that is so generous. And can we just like take a minute to look at her handwriting? Like if she doesn't also design font styles, I don't know what she's doing. I'm just kidding. I just think that her handwriting is fantastic. So it says, "The smoky quartz is for you, Taylor. Thank you for replying to me." Of course, it's my pleasure. And it came in this cute little bag. And I'm using them on Brandon's sweater, and they go so well. So I'm going to get kind of close. Can you see how pretty that is? They're similar in color to the yarn, believe it or not. And they're this beautiful smoky quartz. And it just adds that like touch of elegance to the project. And I love it. Just some nice quality markers that make the project, give it just a little bit of pizzazz, a little elegance. And I love it. So that's DusanaKnit. Definitely check her out. I'll link to her shop in the show notes. Just really lovely stitch markers. Okay, so before I wrap it up in terms of this project, one of the things I wanted to ask you guys about is what on earth I should do in terms of striping. So one thing that I did mention in the last episode is that instead of doing a color work sweater, I wanted to incorporate stripes into this sweater. And in the last episode, I was mulling around doing like a striped yoke pattern, something like that. And I'm just not sure exactly what I want to do, but I'm getting to that point where I need to make a decision because I'm starting to get into the yoke where if I did want to do yoke stripes, I would need to start thinking about where to place that first stripe. In terms of striping colors, I'll be using additional skeins of Lovely Valley wool. And I have these right here. So the contrast is really lovely. A darker gray right here with this little lighter gray down here. And then of course, the natural white to stripe. Now, some thoughts that I had about this. I don't want the sweater to look like something out of like a late 90s, early 2000s Structure store from the mall. I don't know if you live in the US and you remember the store Structure from, I don't know, I want to say like 1998, anywhere from 98 to like 2004. It was a pretty popular store for really preppy gear. I don't really want the sweater to look like that. And I don't know, I feel like I'm kind of putting too much pressure on myself to have it not look like something that's pretty standard. But I wanted to share with you some thoughts that I had. I started a Pinterest page called Knitting Inspo. And I'll share the link to that page if you're interested. But I'm going to pop it up here so that you can see it. And the only things that are on this right now are ideas for this sweater in terms of how I want to incorporate the color. So it's pretty limited. So when I started looking for inspiration for what I should do with these additional colors, I started finding color blocking to be a little bit more appealing. I have to be careful because I need to have the right amount of yarn to make his sweater. I have plenty between all of the colors that I have. I just have to put them in the right placement, so that things kind of weigh out nicely in terms of like color ratios, if that makes any sense. So the first one that caught my attention was this one here. This isn't a knitting pattern. I don't believe it's just a picture, but that is a pretty evened out, color block in thirds. I don't think I have enough of any one color to divide the sweater into thirds like that. But I like this look. I especially like the various textures that are being used in each of the different sections. So that's kind of an idea. And then I saw this, which is interesting because it's the same. It's like thirds, but this is really similar to kind of what I'm trying to do, except it's obviously a heavier weight. And this is a knitting pattern. And I don't know, it looks like you can go purchase this knitting pattern on Etsy. It's a gorgeous knitting pattern for a man's sweater. And I love that collar. What you see this collar doing is what this collar is doing right now. And so when I block it, it's going to open up a little bit more than that. But that just gives you an idea of what it looks like right now. But I like this. I like the striping. I like the look of those raglan seams. It gets me excited about this project. And then I saw this one. This one kind of reminds me of what I'm talking about, like a sweater out of structure from like the late 90s, early 2000s. But it's nice. It's got this classic look about it. It's simple and staple, but it's nice. So there's that option. And then this one, the more I look at this, the more I don't like that. Okay, so here's where this causes me to think that I don't want to do stripes in the yoke of the sweater. I don't like this diagonal like thing happening here that kind of that happens because you're doing a raglan construction with striping. You get this like diagonal line here and then a straight line across the chest and then another diagonal line. That's just the nature of how stripes would come out with raglan seams. I don't know if I love that. So this one might be off the table. I'd have to think about it. But then I started thinking like, well, what about something like this? A little bit more nautical, and I could shake up the color pattern and then have, like a couple stripes and then a larger group of stripes and then a couple stripes. So that was one of my options, which led me to this one, which is a very classic nautical look. I don't know about that. But it does allow me to keep that yoke of the sweater like stripe free for the most part. And then there was this one. And this is more color blocking with that, more narrow stripe at the top. I don't know. So there are some things that I'm thinking of. What do you guys think? What are your suggestions? How should I consider striping this? And I know that this is very personal. And that I ultimately have to go with what my husband would feel comfortable wearing and all of this. But I'd like to know what you guys think, because you might have some insight that I haven't considered. But here is where we are. This is what I have so far. So if I do want to start striping the yoke, I'm going to have to do it soon. But honestly, that like weird angular like striping pattern along the shoulders, I don't know if I'm into that. I may end up just finishing the yoke in this color and then embark on the striping or color block journey after that. But let me know your thoughts. I would love to know your opinion. But here we are. We're in chapter 1 of the Franken Sweater Part 2 Husband Edition saga. And I am excited to go forth with it because I think it's going to be a fantastic sweater. The yarn is gorgeous and it's just kind of fun to, it's fun to explore the sweater knitting process like this. You kind of feel like you have your hand being held a little bit by these other patterns that you're using as, like sources of inspiration or sources of technique, all of these things. So it's fun. If you have any interest in doing something like this, do it, because it's amazing how much you learn about the process through just raw exploration. And this is a point that was made in the comments of the last video. Somebody had mentioned, who is a knitwear designer, that exploring and modifying patterns, I think she was referring more to like, this was not actually in reference to my podcast episode. It was in reference to the 5 rules to follow and 1 to fudge video about gauge, adjusting your gauge based on your swatch, or adjusting which size you're going to knit of a particular item based on your swatch. Anytime you deviate from a pattern's prescribed set of instructions to achieve that finished item, anytime you deviate from that, it is really important to understand that should anything go wrong, that kind of falls on your shoulders because you're deviating from the instructions provided in the pattern. And that goes so far as like gauge. If you're going to change up your stitch count, or if you're going to knit a size that actually isn't what would be prescribed for you based on your gauge, all of these things. like, yeah, you always have to know that it kind of like voids your warranty, essentially. Like, you can't really complain about the outcome because you're no longer following the pattern as prescribed by the designer. So it is something to consider. I appreciated that input because it does make a lot of sense. I don't think that it's something that happens commonly. I don't think that a person would modify a pattern and then go complain to the designer if, you know, things didn't work out. I would hope not, but it is something to take into consideration. But this is a fun process. This is a fun form of exploration and learning through exploration that I absolutely adore. So that is going to be Franken Sweater number 2, living in my JesabelleB leather armlet bag that I adore. You guys know how much I love this. All project bags that I use for my projects are linked down below in the show notes. Follow that link. All of the information is there for you. That's it for me, you guys. Thank you so much for taking the time to hang out with me today. If you enjoyed yourself or took any value from this video, don't forget to give the video a thumbs up. Definitely subscribe. Click the bell icon to be notified anytime I upload new content here on the channel, which is every Wednesday and every Sunday. And until I see you again, happy knitting, happy making, happy whatever it is that you're doing. Take care, be well, and I will see you soon. Bye.